how do you know that the number 5 exists? So how would you reply to that?
The number 5 is a descriptor, right?
Okay.
Yeah. It's an
So
abstraction. It's an abstraction that is useful to us. It's like a word, right? The apple is a fruit. The word apple is something that we invented to point at that fruit so that we understand what we are talking about.
okay, so say
Yeah.
somebody. So there is this thing in mathematics called complex numbers.
Hmm.
So if I say briefly, say for example, there's this number called 4. So what is the
Hmm.
square root of 4? It is 2, right?
Hmm.
So what is the square root of 1? It is 1. Square root of 0 is 0. So if somebody comes and asks you that what is the square root of minus 1,
Hmm.
we don't really have any real answer to that. Any
Hmm.
number's square root won't give you
Hmm.
minus 1. Like
Hmm.
when you square root of minus 1, you don't really get an answer. So what
Is the
mathematicians did,
square
they,
root is the square
yes,
root of is minus 1 a real number?
it's considered a real number by
Is
mathematicians. Yes.
square root of minus 1 a real number?
Uh, that's where the point is. Like mathematicians consider it uh, as a number that does not exist in the real world, something like that.
Hmm.
So basically, they do not have proof for its existence, but they still consider it to be true. So that guy was trying to say that if complex numbers can exist without their
See,
proof in the real world, then
I'm generally speaking not a huge fan of using math as a justification for arguments about existence, because you can do all kinds of things in math that you can't do in real life. If someone wants me to think that, if someone, like, this is an argument for God, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So if someone wants me to think that the square root of minus 1 is what is the equivalent of God, then I would have to ask them, in what way does the square root of minus 1 affect the real world? Because the claims that we hear about God are physical in nature. If someone were to tell me that God only exists in my imagination, I'm totally okay with it. But if someone says that God created the universe, that God has physical ramifications in the physical universe, then I will have to seek physical evidence for it, right? So if
Okay,
someone
so
can show me,
yeah.
if someone can show that a concept in mathematics is considered to be existing, then that is not at all the same as God existing, because the two things are different.
So that guy was basically trying to say that square root of minus 1. So yeah, so mathematicians consider it to exist as concepts, but it is actually very useful to think of something like when you consider square root of minus 1 exists, and when you do maths, it helps you to solve equations and stuff, which helps affects the real world, like
Right.
all the
So
technology.
I'm happy to accommodate the square root of minus 1. I will need to see evidence of how God helps us solve any physical problem. Because you're
So
equating two things, right? You're equating a mathematical quantity that is useful in a theoretical equation, but that is not what we mean when we say God. If you can define God, first of all, the square root of minus 1 is a specific definable thing, right?
yeah, so people give definition of God as anybody who created us is God. That's how they define God.
That is not at all a tangible definition that I can work with, because I don't know how to get there. Where is this
Uh,
creator? How did he work? How do we know that this creator exists? You can show me the method using which you got to the square root of minus 1, right? Can you show
You
me an
cannot show
equation
square
using
root of
which you
minus
can
1
get
in
to
the
God?
real world. Uh,
Sorry?
like, like he was saying that you cannot show square root of minus 1 in the real world.
But you can show it in an equation, right?
I mean, yeah, so God's equation is
So at
God
least
created
show
the
me in
world.
an equation. Show me in an equation how you get to God.
Like, I didn't get you. Can you like explain it a bit?
How will you prove that God exists? Like square root of minus 1, even if I am to consider it real, you can show me how you get to it. There is a method, right?
You can't really
Isn't there?
show it. Like you just
Okay.
consider
So
it
if
to
you can't
exist.
show see, listen, I'm not a mathematician. I'm
Yes, sir.
assuming that if it's a mathematical quantity, you can get to it using an equation. If you can't even get to it using an equation, then it's pretty much non-existent, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, if you consider it to exist, then it helps you to solve all other equations, although you cannot prove its
Okay,
existence.
so
That's when
I
it makes
think
sense.
this would be a better way of putting it.
Yes,
You have a quantity which is square root of minus 1, and it is something that you can put in an equation and you can come to conclusions that make sense. Correct?
yes, yes,
Correct?
yes, yes, correct.
Okay. So now take God, put God in an equation and come to a conclusion that makes sense.
Uh, so, like, exact equations I cannot form, but
No, no,
you
I'm
can,
not
like,
actually asking for a mathematical equation. I'm saying we have seen the natural world right now, right? To the
yes,
best of
yes.
our understanding of the natural world, there is no process that we need God to explain. Absolutely none. Everything makes sense without God. If you add God, things become more complicated. That's what I'm
Okay,
saying. Yeah.
so I get your point. Like, you're saying that
Hmm.
square root of minus, like, considering the existence of square root of minus one helps us to solve equations, but considering the existence of God helps us in no way. Is it like that?
If someone wants to equate the two, if someone says square root of minus 1 cannot be, is not real, but it is still useful, and therefore we should equate it with God, then they should equate it across the board, right? If square root of if the comparison table is like square root of minus 1 is not real, God is not real, square root of minus 1 is useful, God is useful, the useful part needs to be shown. How is it useful?
God gives you, like, happiness and stuff, purpose of life, you know,
A lot of things,
stuff like
people, dragons give me happiness, robots, story, science fiction stories, Batman, comic books give me happiness. That does not mean any of it is real.
like higher
If you're
purpose of life, you know,
sorry,
like God gives people higher purpose of life.
a lot of things give people higher purpose in life. God is not an exclusive solution to that problem.
Okay, so let me ask a relevant question. Do you think
Hmm.
that atheists suffer more from depression than theist people?
Is there any scientific data to support this?
No, no, I'm just asking you, like,
I am an
like,
atheist and I'm reasonably happy. And I know a lot of religious people who are super unhappy. I'm not saying all religious people are unhappy. I'm saying happiness or unhappiness has nothing to do with religion or belief in God.
suicide rates are higher in atheist countries. There was a case. I'm
Is
not
it true? I
supporting
don't
it.
know if that is true. Where is the data coming
Like
from?
countries like Japan, countries like America, you know.
That may not be because of religion. It may have multiple reasons behind it. Do you have any data to suggest that atheists commit more self harm than religious people?
Okay, no, I don't actually. Like, I was
Yeah.
just presenting that.
I'll be happy to see that data, by the way. If you have it, maybe you can come back next time and share it and we can talk about it.
Okay, and so if I, like, conclude it,
Your
what is
last point,
your
huh? Skeptic, I have to go to someone else.
okay? Okay. So,
Huh.
do you think square root of minus one exists,
I'm
or is
not a
it just our
mathematician.
imagination?
I'm not a mathematician. I'll take your word for it. If you know someone who's a mathematician and he tells me that it exists, then I'll be happy to compare their notes with some other mathematician's notes and then come to a conclusion. But I'm not a mathematician. I don't have the brains to come to that conclusion. So I'll just say I don't know.
Okay, then.
Cool. Thank you,
Uh,
man.
okay, okay.
Thank you. Bye bye.